Coronavirus cases has reached more than 600,000 globally. More than 27,000 have died, but more than 131,000 people have recovered. Here in Kenya, the number of confirmed cases is also on the rise. And despite the uncertainty and the fear that comes with this pandemic, Kenyans have also had to bear the brunt of the police's brutal hand in the name of enforcing the dusk to dawn curfew. Welcome to our 360-degree coverage of the state of affairs brought about by the pandemic in the country and around the world. This is NTV Weekend Edition, the top stories. Tonight, the pandemic burrows deeper into our frame.
We have received confirmation of 7 people who have tested positive.
We tell you why Nairobi County is in the red zone. Also tonight, why refusing to keep your distance could be a formula for disaster.
There is not a single estate now in Nairobi that has not been touched with the 28 people that I'm talking about.
Plus, echoes of condemnation of a brute police force.
What we witnessed last night was totally unnecessary.
And the few who've answered the call of service to all.
Naomba mrudi kwa manyumba yenu na mukae na msijaribu kuchelewa siku nyingine.
And also tonight, the virus puts the faith to the test.
Walikuwa naendelea na summons, tulituma officers wetu.
Is social distancing leaving faithfuls feeling distant from God?
This is Weekend Edition with Zainab Ismail.
Thank you for choosing NTV. Our sign language interpreter this evening is Flora Atieno. Now, the country now has 7 new confirmed cases of the coronavirus, bringing the total number to 38. The Ministry of Health says that while a majority of these new infections are from persons who came into the country while infected, focus now shifts to the risk of community infections from interactions with the confirmed cases, with plans to undertake mass testing, especially in Nairobi, already in place. Leila Mohammed begins our broadcast.
Fellow Kenyans,
the opening words for what is now a daily appraisal of the country's fight against the coronavirus was followed by not so good news. Just 24 hours earlier, the ministry had no new infections to report. And now, the city of Nairobi is under scrutiny as it is the host of all the new cases.
out of the 81 samples, we have received confirmation of 7 people who have tested positive for the coronavirus disease. They include 4 Kenyans, 2 Congolese nationals, and 1 Chinese national.
With no known cure or vaccine to curb the further spread of COVID-19, the government is now on a desperate mission to ask Kenyans to stay off the streets, even as it insists that social distancing is the best way to keep COVID-19 at bay. The ministry says all the 7 patients who've tested positive are from Nairobi. And now the ministry is doubling down on the call to city dwellers to keep their distance so as to keep the virus away.
The person you are standing next to right now throughout Kenya, look at that person. Your neighbor could very, very easily be positive. And you know, as we start on the mass tests, we are going to get more and more and more.
And even though social distancing is still very much a distant idea for many, the Ministry of Health assures we are not yet in the red. And even with Nairobi on its radar, it's not yet time to enforce a total lockdown.
It's very interesting that people are asking for a lockdown and they are unable to follow a curfew. A lockdown means that you don't leave your house, period. So, the measures that we are taking are measures that are supposed to try so hard to ensure that we don't get to a lockdown.
The state is monitoring 709 close contacts of those who've tested positive, with 833 people having already been tested for COVID-19. But it is not all doom and gloom. CS Kagwe says patient 0 has tested negative from the first retesting. She is expected to take one more test soon. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
All right. Now, neighbors in Rongai forced a couple that traveled into the country a week ago into quarantine after they refused to do so voluntarily. The couple and their help was picked up and driven to one of the government quarantine facilities. But their case also exposes the pressure that 86 government quarantine facilities are buckling under as they are unable to take in more patients. NTV's Kennedy Mureithi with the details.
The government has been drilling down the message to be one brother's keeper during this time. And even in the most remote nerves of the country, the message seems to be sinking in. Residents in estates are now seemingly more vigilant and aware of their surroundings, and their efforts are starting to bear fruit. In Rongai's Magenche estate, neighbors turned in a couple to the authorities after they refused to self-quarantine, having come back into the country on the 21st of March. Security and health officials from the national and county governments detained the couple and their house help this morning at their home. This is after reports went round that they had been roaming about the town undeterred.
You are not quarantined because you have committed an offense. And I can tell you at a personal level, I have a son who we have quarantined. I have a niece who is in quarantine. And the way we are looking at it is that if a person is in quarantine, they are protecting themselves and they are protecting you. You should be very happy to be in quarantine.
There are reports that the lady often visited the market and the salon regularly, in total disregard for guidelines to stay home and self-isolate. The couple and their help were driven to 3 quarantine centers as the authorities sought a suitable place for forced quarantine. First, they were driven to the cooperative university, but it was full and could not take in more people. Then they were taken to Moi Girls High School in Kibra, but the situation was no different. After making a few calls, they found space at the Ufungamano house.
From tomorrow, we shall embark on a mass testing for those persons who arrived in the country last week and are currently under mandatory quarantine. This will be done in line with the World Health Organization guidelines on testing for the virus.
There are reports that just as they were checking into the facility, 2 more people from Rongai were also reporting into the facility. This even as the government warns of more infections if caution is not exercised at all times.
Your best defense, your best savior is to stay away or keep your distance from the next person.
Kennedy Mureithi, NTV.
Now, religious leaders and human rights groups have condemned the excessive use of force by the police while enforcing the dusk to dawn curfew last night and called for immediate action to be taken on those found guilty. Victor Kiprop reports on the violence and brutality that greeted the first day of the curfew, even as the country entered the second day of an overnight curfew in order to curb the spread of the coronavirus in the country.
A few hours after Kenya entered only its second nationwide dusk to dawn curfew since independence, tens of Kenyans were nursing serious injuries from the violence meted upon them, ironically by the very same people who swore to protect them.
What we witnessed last night was totally unnecessary. Curfew measures were outlined, and yes, the public knows that by 7 p.m. they ought to have been in their houses. But we are facing situations that are beyond normal citizens. So for the police to really react the way they did, for us that's excessive use of force and it is unacceptable.
I would want to appeal that they approach it with a humane face and hand, because they too are our congregants, they too have children, they too have brothers and sisters.
It is extremely important at this time that Kenyan law and the international human rights standards are respected, not just in Kenya but all over the world. The police bear a responsibility and a duty to maintain public order, but also to enforce the law. But they can only use force when strictly necessary.
From journalists in their line of work, ordinary Kenyans heading home, to even defenseless women trying to cross the ocean using the ferry, the police forgot that the enemy was an invisible, highly contagious virus and went on a rampage, tear-gassing, beating and assaulting innocent civilians, in most cases defeating the sole purpose of the curfew.
In all this situation, we are supposed to be adhering to the Ministry of Health guidelines on social distancing. So when you force Kenyans to queue back to back, already we are staring at a very critical situation where probably the spread of the virus is taking place.
We also need to be concerned for the police officers that were involved in the operation yesterday. Very few of them, I don't think I saw more than 2 or 3 that had masks. None of them had gloves. Many of them were actually touching people.
The Independent Policing Oversight Authority, IPOA, says it is investigating the matter.
We have also engaged with the Cabinet Secretary, Minister of Interior and Coordination of National Government, Dr. Fred Matiang'i, who reiterated the importance of ensuring that the police oversight continues to protect Kenyans from police officers who flout the law.
Before Kenya begins enforcing a dusk to dawn curfew for the second day in order to curb the spread of coronavirus in the country, many Kenyans are already rushing to beat the 7 p.m. deadline. But given the brutality witnessed in the enforcement of the curfew yesterday, many are in fear of what is in store for those who will not be home by the time darkness falls. Victor Kiprop, NTV.
All right, now efforts by different governments across the world to contain the spread of coronavirus are adversely affecting journalists' ability to do the job freely. In Kenya, journalists have been attacked by police officers as the curfew took effect on Friday in Mombasa. Elsewhere, an Algerian journalist was arrested following a crackdown that the Reporters Without Borders term as the use of the coronavirus crisis as an excuse to crack down on independent media. In China, journalists from the USA have been ejected. In Kenya, the attack on the journalists has also been condemned by different stakeholders, including the Media Council and the Editors Guild. And the Nation Media Group has condemned the attack on Kenyans, including women, children, and one of nation's journalists by police at the Likoni ferry crossing in Mombasa at various locations in Nairobi and the rest of the country. Now, in a strongly worded statement signed by the group's head of corporate and regulatory affairs, Clifford Mashoka, NMG says the level of violence meted out on Kenyans trying to beat the 7 p.m. curfew was unreasonable, against the law, and defeats the purpose of uniting the country against the COVID-19 pandemic. NMG also describes how the police acted as outrageous and indefensible. One of the NTV journalists based in Mombasa was caught up in the violence when the police began assaulting the public 2 hours before the curfew. In attacking Peter Wainaina, NMG says the police not only violated the constitutional protections of the media, but also acted in contravention of the government's own decision to recognize journalists as providing an essential service and therefore allowed out during the curfew. NMG, however, reiterated its full support for the government's curfew and any other quarantine measures that will be imposed to keep people at home, prevent the coronavirus spread and save lives, and commended the members of the National Police Service and disciplined forces in other parts of the country who upheld their mission to provide professional and people-centered police service through community partnership and upholding the rule of law for a safe and secure society. And the first night of the curfew started in tears, chaos and injuries as police came down hard on those who failed to adhere to the rules restricting movement between 7 p.m. and 5 a.m. But amid all the chaos, Baringo Central AP Commandant Ibrahim Abachila endeared himself to the public after he chose a different tool for his night duties. Abachila was filmed assembling those who were caught past curfew, and instead of beating them up, he decided to sensitize them about the killer virus before sanitizing their hands and allowing them to go home. His humane side did not go unnoticed as Kenyans on social media praised him for his efforts, with a majority calling on his colleagues to borrow a leaf. Another police officer, a lady, was also showered with praise after she helped a mother and her child get home to safety. From NTV, we say, good job. Indeed, choosing a different route instead of what Kenyans probably expected. Now, the government says it will suspend ferry services at the Likoni channel if commuters continue to defy set regulations on social distancing in the fight against the spread of coronavirus. Coast Regional Coordinator John Elung'ata has also maintained that the stipulated nationwide curfew has to be strictly adhered to, calling for residents to be home by 7 p.m. Kevin Mutai has more.
The chaos that unfolded on Friday evening at the Likoni channel resulted in a stampede that caused injuries as the GSU officers and the National Youth Service battered helpless commuters. And from the fog of confusion, Mombasa County's top leadership and the region's security organs now have a plan to ensure such scenes do not play out again going forward.
Magari yatavuka kuanzia saa 8 mpaka saa 9, and then we close vehicles movement on the ferry. Tubaki tu kuvukisha wananchi.
Kama wananchi wetu wataona kwamba hawawezi kutegemea yale tunawaambia, basi tutafunga kabisa lockdown hiyo, watu wakae ngambo ile, wengine wakae ngambo hii.
The county government of Mombasa has also waived extra charges for wholesalers crossing over to Likoni in a bid to reduce the number of people seeking to buy food products and other items from Kongowea market. Those working have also been instructed to be at the ferry by 3 o'clock before the vessels are withdrawn from the channel.
Let us use the curfew positively. Ikuwe ni curfew ya kuweza kupambana na corona, isiwe ni curfew pengine wengine wataumia.
Ikiwa huna jambo lolote la kufanya, jaribu kuepuka na mambo ya kurandaranda bila mipangilio.
Dawa nzuri ya coronavirus ni kubaki nyumbani. Hakuna dawa nyingine.
Tafadhali observe the guidelines that are provided for you.
The vessels have also been marked as the authorities urge commuters to stand at designated areas to avoid crowding. The leaders are also calling for action against police officers who brutally maimed commuters yesterday. Kevin Mutai, NTV, Mombasa.
Well, curfews and lockdowns have proven to be an effective measure to flatten the curve of the spread of the virus as it minimizes contact between people. The government now hopes the nighttime curfew that came into force yesterday may just be the country's saving grace as Kenyans continue to ignore calls to avoid crowds and keep their distance. Here's NTV's Eunice Omolo with a breakdown on why it is hard to be done at night.
Governments around the world are seriously and urgently rushing to flatten the curve as coronavirus cases continue to grow. Most countries are advocating for social distancing as a way of minimizing transmission. In Kenya, the government has resorted to enforcing a curfew which was effected Friday.
The curfew has been necessitated by the fact that it has been very difficult to maintain social distancing. A lot of our people who have been infected is as a result of social interactions and from our own observations, usually in the evenings and at night.
The Ministry of Health has also expressed concerns over those violating quarantine. Health officials accuse them of observing quarantine only during the day and flouting it at night, thereby exposing Kenyans to the virus.
A lot of the people who have the potential as carriers of the disease are very young people who also tend to socialize at night.
With minimized movement of people, the ministry says it can easily trace and track all contacts, test and isolate if necessary.
There is not a single estate now in Nairobi that has not been touched with the 28 people that I'm talking about. Your neighbor could very, very easily be positive. And you know, as we start on the mass tests, we are going to get more and more and more.
The Ministry of Health is currently working with what it calls Scenario 3. Here is that scenario. In this scenario, health officials assume that an asymptomatic individual arrived in the country through one of the points of entry undetected. The individual developed signs and symptoms of COVID-19 within the local community before seeking medical attention. The scenario further assumes that the individual interacted with the community members and frontline health workers before diagnosis was made. Currently, Kenya has 38 confirmed cases. In total, the Ministry of Health has identified 1,141 contacts. And to break this down even further, for instance, the one case reported in Malindi was in contact with 122 people, while one case in Siaya has 138 contacts. Back to the scenario. From the over 1,000 possible contacts, 50% are at risk to develop the disease within 14 days. From this, 20% of them progress to severe disease, including pneumonia and respiratory failure, while 5% of those who develop the disease die.
That the over 1,000 contacts we are talking about are also going to be with another 1,000 contacts somewhere along the line. This is how this disease spreads. This is how people in Italy and elsewhere are dying in the thousands per day.
The government appeals to the masses to practice social distancing, which has been promoted as the surest way of cutting down local transmission. The government believes that the curfew will slow down the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Eunice Omolo, NTV, Nairobi.
All right, thanks, excuse me, Eunice, for that, and of course for breaking down for us how that chain of infection really goes about. Well, the curfew that came into effect on Friday means that all Kenyans need to be indoors from 7 p.m. to 5 a.m. without fail. But what happens to the 20,000 Kenyans who have no, who have no roof over their heads? NTV's Brenda Wanga spoke to some of those who live on the streets and reports on their experiences on the first night of the curfew.
At the Uhuru Park lawns, scores of the homeless and street families are getting in their 40 winks of sleep. On any other day, they will be out and about in the streets of the city, eking out a living. Not today. They nap now because last night there was no rest for their weary bones. At the onset of the curfew, they were on the receiving end of the law enforcement's efforts to impose this curfew.
Hatukupata nafasi ya kulala. Tulipigwa marungu usiku mzima.
And so for now, they take that much needed rest so they preserve their energies for what they know is likely to be another night on the run. According to the 2019 census, Kenya has about 20,000 people who live in the streets. For this, life on the streets is hard enough under ordinary circumstances. The coronavirus situation in the country's measures to stop its spread are making a bad situation that much worse.
Wale wateja wenye tulikuwa tunawabebea wote wamejificha kwa manyumba. Wanaogopa corona.
Giza ikiingia mzee. Roho inaanza kugonga vibaji. Sasa tuna imagine tunakaa hapa ndani hakuna food, lazima tuingie street. Hiyo town ndo tafute vile tunamanga. Sasa tukikaa hapa sasa hii, imagine sasa hakuna food, hakuna msee mwenye anajitokeza juu anaogopa corona. Hakuna msee atatokea hivyo kuja tupatie meda. Sasa lazima tuingie na sisi tunaogopa ikifikia time hatuwezi ingia tao.
Now, with limited economic activities in the CBD during the day and the curfew at night, their survival options are becoming slimmer by the day.
Si watu tunategemea ile hoteli imepika ile food imebaki, at least ukiwa na 30 ama mbao utadish, then umedozi hivyo ukiwa poa. But hakuna vile tutaenda kwa sasa 5 kumefungwa na tulikuwa tumezoea kwenda huko saa 3 saa 4. Sasa hakuna vile tuna access ta, inabidi tumekanja hivyo.
Meanwhile, in Eldoret, street children were sensitized on the importance of practicing proper hygiene through hand washing as a way of keeping themselves safe from infection. Brenda Wanga, NTV.
Well, Kenyans in various parts of the country are battling to stay put as floods wash away their homes and sources of livelihood, while at the same time fighting a seemingly invisible enemy. The excessive rainfall this month comes close on the heels of an economic meltdown and a dusk to dawn curfew occasioned by the coronavirus, a situation that the Kenya Red Cross Society now says is urgent as it calls on the government to assess preparedness before things take a turn for the worst. Take a look. As the country adheres to directives to stay home from dusk to dawn, residents of Budalangi in Busia County are facing a double tragedy. They are having to spend their nights in the cold after their homes were destroyed by floods caused by the ongoing unrelenting rains. The lot of them are now in a state of despair with no home to go to as night falls and curfew begins. Their crops and livestock too have been washed away by the rainwater, which means even food is now a scarce commodity.
Ikakuja mara ya mvua kunyesha ya kwanza ikafika mahali kiasi, ikakuja ikanyesha mara ya pili. Sasa tukahama, tukaona kwamba hii tukasema acha tuhamishe vitu kiasi twende kwa jirani pale juu, tukatoka hapo tukaenda kwa juu kiasi. Kutoka pale kuna vitu chache ilikuwa imebaki kwa nyumba, tukasema hivi vitu tutajibeba Jumapili kesho. Asubuhi tuje tuangalie vile inafanya, tukapata nyumba yote ni maji, kila kitu ni maji.
They say they are aware and afraid of contracting the coronavirus, but cannot comply with some of the directives, like keeping a meter distance from each other, as they have to stick together to brave the cold nights. Early in the week, the Kenya Meteorological Department had warned of heavy rainfall in different parts of the country until the end of March. The Kenya Red Cross Society has now called on the government to put in place measures to safeguard citizens against the impact of the floods that could potentially cause more harm in light of the coronavirus pandemic.
Many parts of the country are likely to receive heavy rainfall that could lead to flash floods and possible displacement. Indeed, already we have seen this. We have seen flash floods in Ahero, in West Kenya, and landslides in parts of West Pokot. As part of contingency planning, we want to urge immediate review of our readiness to deal with any impacts, including potential displacements.
And the copious amount of rainfall in March also means cooler than normal temperatures in these regions, which might hold significance amid the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. If the country experiences the flash floods as announced by the Kenya Meteorological Department, then the stagnant floodwaters in the city slums and other parts of the country may result in further infections, as the particles may be carried on through the air. Well, of course, with the rising number of the coronavirus in the world itself, we'll be taking a look at some of the numbers in Africa as well as in other areas across the globe. Just take a look at really how the numbers are rising. Of course, we said at this point, the number is about 600 and above, 600,000 and above. Of that, the active cases now stand at 462,402. From that, we also have 28,963 deaths, and recovered 138,085 people have managed to recover. So from our global tracker, we'll just take a look at Africa. Let me get that for us. We'll just begin with Kenya at this point. So Kenya, we do have a total of 38 cases, 36 active, 1 deceased, 1 recovered, with 7 additional cases having been reported today. In South Africa, we have 1,170 total cases, 1,138 of those being active, 1 deceased and 31 recovered. Up north in Algeria, we have 454 total cases, 396 active, 29 deceased, 29 recovered. Today, there was an additional 45 cases that were reported, and 3 people have died today in Algeria. Just moving forward away from that, in Brazil, we have 3,477 total cases, 3,378 active, 93 deceased and 6 recovered. Today, there were 60 additional cases that were reported, and 1 person has died today in Brazil due to COVID-19. We also now have the United States of America, which now stands at 112,377 total cases. Of those, 1,873 people have died and 3,219 have been able to recover. Today, just today, 8,251 cases have been reported and 177 people have died in the United States. Well, we'll be getting more from our global tracker, and we'll be also showing you what is happening in Italy. Remember, the cases there have gone tremendously high. So we're going to take a short break here on NTV Weekend Edition. We've lined up a lot for you. Stay with us.
For a better tomorrow, don't forget to do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate every night.
The first time I held you, I fell in love with you, and I knew there was something great in you. I can't help but think of the legacy you will leave. I'm proud of who you've become. From mere ambitions to bigger challenges, from having that dream to actually living it, from moving out to settling your family in this dream home.
Every day, we endeavor to provide you with the best real estate solutions. Own your dream home at Victory Gardens, just 10 minutes drive from Kitengela town. Call us today on 0790 300 300.
Welcome to the conferencing service.
Emma! Carry on, Ken!
First quarter sales, they're up 90%.
Very good! Very good!
We are looking at a 55 billion shilling profit by the end of the financial year.
Now we are talking! Here we talk billions! Very good! I gotta go! Wacha niendelee na kazi!
A person has left the conference.
Niko nyumbani! Downloads are very fast! Streaming, eco! And I'm just working from here! Stay connected and work from the convenience of wherever you are. Fiber to the home.
Working from home? No problem. Fiber Home has you covered with the fastest and most reliable internet speeds. Get connected today. Kazi lazima iendelee.
To the out-of-framers, the turtleneckers, the fringe growers, you don't need to hide anymore. Try Dettol Even Tone. It cleans and helps to reduce the appearance of blemishes caused by oil, dirt and germs, giving your skin a healthy feel. Join the millions that have switched to Dettol Even Tone, now also in pomegranate fragrance, a healthier skin for an even better you. Brought to you by the Kenya Consortium of Medical and Health Professionals. Dettol, be 100% sure.
Sensitivity is a short, sharp pain that people experience when they have something hot or cold getting to the nerve of the tooth, causing that discomfort. If the sensitivity is left alone, it may get worse. Dentists recommend Sensodyne to their patients. It's able to get inside the tooth and calm the nerve of the tooth down, and the proof's in the results. It works.
Well, thank you so much for staying with us. You're watching NTV Weekend Edition. Now, police in Bungoma County this morning raided 2 Catholic churches which were holding morning masses against the government directive on public gatherings in the wake of the highly contagious COVID-19 in the country. The coronavirus pandemic has impacted religion in various ways, including the cancellation of worship gatherings and pilgrimage for various faiths. And as NTV's Rose Ongwe reports, religious leaders are calling the coronavirus outbreak a test of faith for the church.
For the first time in Kenya's history, churches have suspended their Sunday services across the country. The move was occasioned by the government directive to reduce social gatherings. Following a tip-off from the public, police officers today morning raided 2 churches in Bungoma County, which have been conducting masses every day between 6:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m., despite an order against public gatherings. At St. Paul's Catholic Church in Kandui, the priest who was leading the mass was summoned and cautioned by the police, while the mass at Christ the King Catholic Church, Bungoma Town, was ended hurriedly, and the faithful dispersed before the police truck arrived.
Tunataka kutoa onyo ya mwisho kwa haya makanisa kwamba watii amri.
Churches and houses of worship are important anchor institutions in many communities, especially in times of humanitarian crisis. So in the wake of coronavirus, when cities are shutting down and self-quarantine is essential, religious leaders have been forced to adjust to challenging and unforeseeable circumstances.
The challenge we are facing is because we don't have the congregation present in the church. We are only missing that community, what we call face-to-face attendance.
Traditionally, religious rituals are meant to be enacted, soul and body, alongside other believers. But the present dangers of the deadly virus are too great to ignore.
The cry of the country and the cry of the world is to God to hear us and even to make those confessions very alive to God, to ask for forgiveness, not only for the individual, but for what we as human beings have done. The concerns and the fears and the anxieties to God, our living God, and to our Savior, Jesus Christ. Let us invite him to our boats, meaning to our houses.
Easter, Ramadan, Passover and other holidays are approaching, and the coronavirus will undoubtedly upend religious lives in 2020.
Why did it happen when we are in the Lenten season and also while we are waiting for the resurrection of Christ? It's like a morning time for us. It's like going to the Calvary. It's already like we are in the tomb and waiting for resurrection.
In Italy, which remains the most affected by coronavirus within Europe, the Vatican has announced that Holy Week rituals which occurred during the last week of the Lent season have been cancelled. The Diocese of Rome has closed its chapels and churches, and its iconic St. Peter's Square is empty of tourists and pilgrims. For now, churches have bolstered their digital footprints by accepting offerings online, posting sermons on social media, and hosting group meetings via video chat. Rozongoi, NTV.
Well, around the country, Kenyans woke up to dead silence after a night curfew that came into force yesterday. NTV's Naoma Sampao was there when the capital's busiest market woke up to the new reality and tells us more about what is now likely to be the new normal.
As the dark cloud of the night lifted to give way to daylight, the city woke up to the silence that enveloped it as dusk fell. For this part of the city that hardly ever sleeps, the Marikiti market, the early morning activity has been hunkered down significantly. The trucks that transport the commodities that traders cram here every morning for were parked. There were no traders present. The market only started coming alive at some minutes past 5, an hour later than usual. And for the traders who were here then, it was a race to the finish line, all precautions to guard against the virus discarded.
Tunakuanga supposed kufika around saa 10, lakini leo nimeona kutoka kwa nyumba tumetoka 5. So tumefika hapa hivi around 5:30.
Local businesses have been hard hit since coronavirus was reported in Kenya 2 weeks ago. Now, with the just commenced overnight curfew, the supply chain has been disrupted and small-scale traders operating in Marikiti have not been spared.
Mizigo hii yetu inakosa kufika ile mazaa inatakikana. Alafu tena watu kukuja kununua wanaona kama wanaumizwa kwa sababu mazaa ya kuuza si nzuri vile. Haya, na wale wanatununulia sisi ni watu wa vipanda. Na vipanda inafungangwa saa ngapi? 3. Sasa wanasema ya kwamba ile mizigo wananunua haiishi kwa sababu sasa mazao yao imekuwa dogo.
Despite the prevailing challenges that have made their businesses that much harder to thrive, they're now bracing for what is likely to be the new norm.
Tunajua iliwekwa kwa ajili ya kutuangalia kulingana na hii ugonjwa imetokea ya corona.
Tukifanyiwa ati tuwe tunaamka siku vile tunaamkanga, watu watakuwa wanaingia kwa club, wanaingia wote, tunaambukizana hiyo disease, na tunaona vile Italy wamekufa wote. Walianza hivyo.
The streets countryside were deserted and isolated. Only the domestic animals had the streets to themselves. And a handful of police officers who were part of those enforcing a night curfew that was also stained with violence. Around the country, Kenyans woke up to eerie silence after a tumultuous night that saw some who violated the curfew injured. Naoma Sampao, NTV.
Well, for the residents of the country's northeastern counties of Mandera, Wajir and Garissa, a nighttime curfew is nothing new. These counties have had to live with the restrictions owing to the insecurity that has plagued the regions. NTV's Ahmed Maulid reports from Mandera that police made little effort to ensure people are at home.
It is 1.5 hours before the curfew starts, and the siren blast of this police car, a resounding reminder that the time for them to be outdoors freely is slipping away. The residents know all too well what this means. Within minutes, the street and business centers are deserted as residents answer the call to shelter in place. But none of this is new to residents here, who have grown accustomed to the howls of police dogs on the prowl for any offenders. For an area afflicted by insecurity, this has been their normal.
Mambo ya kusema curfew. Sisi tulikuwa na curfew permanent and pensionable for the last 5 years. Moja alikuwa ya Al-Shabaab, because we are on the border. Moja alikuwa ya insecurity. Moja ni hii ya coronavirus. Curfew ya corona. Sisi tuko tayari.
Their previous experience have been an invaluable lesson. Police here have a less hectic time, getting people away from the streets and into the safety of their homes. The rest of the country settles in what is seemingly an unfamiliar territory. They can only offer some advice.
I'm just advising you to stay or to take the order of the president, as we take the order of the county commissioner of Mandera before.
It is no different in Wajir and Garissa counties. The enforcement in these counties was without much drama. Residents there too have had to live under curfew in the wake of a series of Al-Shabaab attacks. Ahmed Abdi, NTV, Mandera.
All right, and on that point, time for another breather, but still ahead. Treasury's plan to inject life to the ailing export processing zones. Stay with us.
Selena!
Toto, where's mommy?
Today's a toilet day.
What? Oh. Selena! Toilet day?
Tomorrow we're hosting a party and it's a matter of my reputation.
It's a toilet, not a white shirt. Even if you spend your entire day cleaning with bleach and detergent, it still won't be party ready.
Impossible.
Challenge. Harpic 10X. Even if you use bleach and detergent 10 times, they won't give you the same sparkling clean toilet that Harpic 10X will give you.
Wow!
Harpic 10X. Harpic, Kenya's #1 toilet cleaner.
Female genital mutilation is one of the worst forms of gender-based violence that is meted on girls and women worldwide. According to UNICEF, more than 200 million girls and women alive today have been cut worldwide, and 9.3 million have undergone the cut in Kenya. Another 3 million girls are at risk of undergoing the cut every year. Therefore, His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta has committed to end FGM in Kenya by the year 2022. Ending FGM is the responsibility of every Kenyan. Kukomesha ukeketaji ni jukumu langu, jukumu lako na jukumu letu. Pamoja tukomeshe ukeketaji kufikia mwaka wa 2022. This message is brought to you by the Anti-FGM Board in collaboration with UNICEF Kenya.
Protect yourself against coronavirus by using Amara antibacterial hand sanitizer that will effectively clean your hands and eliminate disease-causing virus while you're on the go. In line with government regulations against traders hiking the price of hand sanitizers, report any trader selling out of the below prices to 020-864-2330 or 020-864-2333.
Dettol's main objective is to help children protect themselves from diseases. Do you know how we get illnesses like diarrhea, cough, and cold?
No!
They are spread through germs on your hands. Your hands collect germs that causes diseases. You pick up germs from any surface, like when you don't wash your hands after going to the toilet, while playing. And then you can get sick because of germs. That's why you need to fight germs to stay healthy by washing your hands regularly with Dettol soap that gives the best germ protection ever against many illness-causing germs.
Wash, wash, wash your hands. What you have to do is bath, bath, bath yourself. Dettol soap every day. Wash, wash, wash your hands.
Good morning, Janet.
Wow! And you are?
I'm Casey. Now help you with anything to do with your KCB bank account. Pay bills, transfers, statements.
You're hired.
I'm your internet banking security ninja. I'm your 24/7 personal assistant.
Super.
So, we can always talk about your account, online, whenever you like. Need a ride?
Let's go.
Alrighty,
With you anywhere, anytime.
Register at your nearest branch for KCB Internet Banking today.
Usingoje hadi dakika ya mwisho. Pimwa kwenye hospitali ya serikali. Matibabu inapatikana bila malipo. TB inakinga na tiba.
Ever thought of owning a place you call your home? Mahiga Homes is turning your long life goal into a reality in a period of 10 months. 25 minutes drive from Nairobi CBD in a fast developing area on exit 11 of the thickest superhighway in a serene environment with all social, economic and health amenities within reach. 2 million Kenya shillings as a deposit and the balance in flexible installments. Mahiga Homes, creating smiles.
Hi, thank you so much for staying with us. The coronavirus has thrown a wild card into the business environment, with sales declining, revenues dropping and companies adopting contingency plans in a bid to stay afloat. One of the hardest hit segment of the economy is the export processing zone, which relies on the export market. Julian Semboko now tells us of the latest plan by the National Treasury to throw a lifeline to these businesses.
Enterprises operating in the export processing zones target largely the external market. As a matter of fact, the law provides that at least 80% of all their produce should be headed to external markets, or the exports, I should say. But unfortunately, with the coronavirus fast spreading, what this means is that supply chains are disrupted, global trade is decelerated, and unfortunately, their business prospects are now in a bind. To provide a lifeline to these business ventures, the government, through the National Treasury, has now lifted the ceiling set for the maximum proportion of produce from EPZ businesses that can be destined for the local market. In a letter addressed to the Kenya Revenue Authority's Commissioner General Githi Mburu, dated March 20th, 2020, National Treasury's Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani further says that since there are no legal provisions exempting goods from EPZ businesses sold locally from taxes and duties, the government has undertaken to settle accompanying taxes on behalf of those enterprises. This happens even as the reduction of value-added tax from 16% to 14% is set to take effect following the filing of a special gazette notice by the National Treasury on 26th March 2020. The reduction in VAT is among the raft of tax measures President Uhuru Kenyatta proposed, with the view to cushioning consumers from the adverse economic conditions. In an interview with NTV, Ukur Yatani revealed that a supplementary budget is underway to make adjustments in light of the changes being adopted.
We may look at other development projects and push it to the next financial year so that we can move as much money as we can to address the current challenges that cannot wait until next financial year.
Kenya has 72 gazetted export processing zones housing 135 businesses, which have created employment for an estimated 57,500 persons. In 2018, EPZ businesses registered exports worth 72.3 billion shillings and sales to the domestic market worth 4.9 billion shillings. Julian Amboko, NTV.
All right, thanks, Julians, for that. We take yet another break on NTV Weekend Edition, but still ahead.
Wow! Inakompresiwa na 50 tons of force, alafu ina roll pakiwa. Hii iliniashua itani last kuliko mattress zingine zote nimekuwa nikinunua.
The first time I held you, I fell in love with you.
and I knew there was something great in you. I can't help but think of the legacy you will leave. I'm proud of who you've become. From mere ambitions to bigger challenges, from having that dream to actually living it, from moving out to settling your family in this dream home.
Every day, we endeavor to provide you with the best real estate solutions. Own your dream home at Victory Gardens, just 10 minutes drive from Kitengela town. Call us today on 0790 300 300.
For a better tomorrow, don't forget to do the 1, 2, 3 with Colgate every night.
Heaviness and a burning inside, it could be heartburn.
Kiungulia na kuvimbiwa? Ino inatibu ndani ya sekunde 6 na inatuliza dalili 6 za kiungulia. Kwa hivyo unaweza kuburudika bila kikomo. Ino, tibu haraka kiungulia na tumbo kuvimba.
Molfix breathable surface developed with Airsoft technology is very soft and provides the best Molfix skincare.
I found the best diaper for my baby's sensitive skin.
All babies deserve a high-quality diaper. You should also try Molfix.
Basic protective measures as guided by the World Health Organization. Clean hands frequently with soap and clean water. Cover nose and mouth when coughing and sneezing with a tissue or flexed elbow. Avoid close contact 1 meter or 3 feet with anyone with cold or flu-like symptoms. If you have fever, cough and difficulty breathing, seek medical care early. Avoid raw or uncooked animal products. Help the world put an end to the spread of respiratory diseases by sharing this message with a friend. Message brought to you by Sour Herbal Family Bath Soap.
Sona moja imetengenezwa kwa njia spesheli ili kupambana na maumivu kwa haraka. Sona moja ina aspirin kama kiungo. Sona moja, kitulizo kamili. Maumivu yakizidi, pata ushauri wa daktari.
Protect yourself against coronavirus by using Amara antibacterial hand sanitizer that will effectively clean your hands and eliminate disease-causing virus while you're on the go.
The Chinese city of 11 million people that was ground zero for what became the global coronavirus pandemic partly reopened on Saturday after more than 2 months of almost total isolation. Wuhan was placed under lockdown in January, with residents forbidden to leave, roadblocks ring-fencing the city's outskirts and drastic restrictions on daily life. But the major transport and industrial hub has now signalled the end of its long isolation, with state media showing the first officially sanctioned passenger train arriving back into the city just after midnight. People are now allowed to enter but not leave, and many trains had been fully booked days in advance. Staff at Wuhan station were all clad in full protective gear, with the reception desks lined up, ready to process returnees who had been overseas. China is now battling to control a wave of imported cases as infections soar abroad. All arrivals in Wuhan have to show a green code on a mobile app to prove that they are healthy. More than 2,500 people are still hospitalized with the disease in Wuhan, including nearly 900 severe cases. Now look at this. A video of police officers singing and dancing in a neighborhood in Spain has gone viral on social media amid the difficult times brought by the coronavirus pandemic. The officers chose to light up the residents' day with music to keep people's spirits up during a nationwide lockdown, which has been extended until at least April 11th. So with the communities facing several more weeks in isolation, everybody is definitely in need of some cheering up. Take a look. Well, indeed, everybody needs some cheering up at this particular point, and maybe some of our officers could borrow a leaf. Well, we'll take another break. When we come back, I'll be bringing you all the sporting action. Stay with us.
Swaddling needs a blanket and helps your baby feel safe and secure as she adjusts to life outside the womb. Spread your baby's blanket out on a flat surface. Place your baby face up on the blanket. Their head should sit above the folded corner. Straighten your baby's arms, then take the sides of the blanket and wrap it over their arms and chest. Loosely twist the bottom of the blanket and tuck it underneath your baby. At this point, your baby is fully covered.
Kiss Kids, no rashes. Bye-bye rashes. Bye diapers. Choose Kiss Kids.
Thank you for staying with us. Now, 2 former National Sevens rugby coaches have urged rugby players to utilize their careers prudently, advising them that it is short. The 2 coaches, Benjamin Ayimba and Paul Murunga, advised the players to use their skills outside the field to improve their lives.
Nadhani ni historia na ni desturi labda iliwekwa hapo awali, kwa sababu hapo kitambo kidogo ilikuwa kwanza raga ilikuwa inachezwa na shule za hali ya juu kiasi, shule kama Lenana, Nairobi, Alliance, Mangu. Ndani hapo ndio tofauti ilianzia, lakini saizi pia labda vitu zimebadilika, lakini bado naamini kuwa watu wengi ambao wanacheza raga pia na shule nyingi ambazo pia zimekuwa zikisaidia wachezaji kucheza raga pia ni shule ambazo zimekuwa zikifanya vyema pia kimasomo.
Nidhamu, ukitaka kuwa na nidhamu lazima uende skuli. Unatarajiwa kuwa mtu ambaye una uzoefu fulani, kuamka mapema, kwenda darasani, kusikiza walimu. Na nidhamu ni kitu kikubwa sana kwenye rugby. Ndio kwa sababu tunatia manani sana kwenye watu kwenda skuli.
Inakuwaje kwamba mchezaji wa raga hawezi akangazia raga peke yake, lazima kufanya kazi kwingine ndio anakuja kucheza?
Kwa sababu maishani muda wa kucheza ni mfupi sana, na ukipata jeraha ndio hivyo.
Raga inalipa kama unaweza ukaitegemea kama wewe hujasoma?
Raga kwa sasa hailipi kiwango hicho. Ukiwa timu ya taifa maybe, lakini pale vilabuni haiwezi.
Alright, as a way of preventing coronavirus spread in the country, the Victor Wanyama Foundation has donated hygiene kits and foodstuff to over 200 families in Mathare slums here in Nairobi. The foundation, in partnership with the Kenya Red Cross, Africa Yoga Project and the Gina Dean Foundation, donated the basics to the families during these testing times. The Harambee Stars captain, who plays for Montreal Impact in Canada, has urged Kenyans to follow the set guidelines in order to kick out the deadly virus.
Tumekuja kushare hapa juu tunaona shida mingi inatoka hapa ghetto. For example, watu wengi wenye wanafanya kazi huku ni hao wa mjengo. Sasa venye imefungwa wanahangaika.
Well, footballer Tony Dovell has put his football boots to one side and slipped into a pharmacist's white coat in the frontline struggle against coronavirus in Spain. The 29-year-old pharmacy graduate and former top-level sportsman had been playing football for a Thai club, but was visiting his family in Spain when the COVID-19 pandemic took hold. Travel restrictions trapped Dovell in his native La Coruña in the Atlantic coast region of Galicia, where he started his football career with nearby Celta Vigo. Although Dovell also completed his university studies in pharmacy 4 years ago, he had never actually worked in the field. Now, with the world of sport in limbo, the footballer realized this was the time to use his studies to help his homeland. And Atletico Madrid became the latest La Liga club to request labor authorities to allow them to cut player and staff salaries while football is suspended in Spain due to the pandemic. In a statement, club CEO Miguel Angel Gil said that they were obliged to propose a partial unemployment plan for the employees who, due to the state of emergency in the country, could no longer carry their work. Athletic are among a raft of clubs set to take a huge financial hit due to the indefinite suspension of football in Spain, one of the country's worst hit by the COVID-19. Earlier on Friday, La Liga's bottom club Espanyol asked labor authorities in Catalonia to allow them to cut player and staff salaries by 70%. City rivals Barcelona said on Thursday that they were cutting salaries, although they would not specify who would be affected in order to stave off financial issues. In Germany, players at Bayern Munich and Borussia Dortmund have accepted pay cuts. All right, and that brings us to the end of our bulletin this hour. Many thanks for keeping us company. We will continue bringing you all the updates and information with regards to the coronavirus pandemic in the country. The number of cases now stands at 38, and globally, the cases are now over 600,000, with about 400,000 which are active. So a number have recovered, and there are, of course, a number of people which are about 20,000 and above who have died due to the pandemic. Well, that brings us to the end of our bulletin. Our sign language interpreter this evening was Flora Atieno. My name is Zainab Ismail from the entire team that made this possible. Thank you for watching. Do enjoy the rest of your viewing and stay safe.
This is NTV.
I help women find independence by training them in fish farming. It's tough on my back, joints, and can cause headaches.